Announce that we are recording this session. I want to be on the complete up and up. I'm Marcy Hinnon. We're so excited to have you here. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name and affiliation. We would love to know who's here. We're going to keep your mics and cameras off for the webinar until we get to the question and answer part later, but we would love it if you're willing to introduce yourself in the chat so folks are aware of who's in the Zoom room here. And it would also be great if you're willing to share your email address, either by direct message or in the chat. We want to keep track of everyone so that we can send you some of our materials that we are going to be talking about and distributing as part of this webinar. So put your email address either in the chat or direct message it, and we will make sure that you're on the list to receive the materials after the webinar. So I'm going to introduce our team. If Susan, we're ready to go. Are we ready to go? Okay, cool. So I'm Marcy Hinnon, and we have 3 members of our Arts and Climate California team here today. My co-lead, Susan Misra, who many of you have met before at the World Cafe in Oakland and other online events. Adriana Greeno, also from the World Cafe and various interviewing and other aspects of this project, and Giancarlo Rodriguez, who keeps putting himself off camera because he's our amazing tech coordination in addition to many other roles in this project. So good morning, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you join us today. We're thrilled that we're here because we were just discussing as a team that we can't believe that this is the culminating event of our Bay Area research, the Arts and Climate California Needs Assessment Bay Area, which actually started in July. So we are thrilled to be at this point of this culminating event. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the agenda. I'm going to give you a little context, and then I'm going to turn things over to Susan for more content here. But one more housekeeping note, if you have questions as we go through the material today, please put them in the chat at any time. Giancarlo is going to help us organize that. We are going to have 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the webinar where we'll open up all the cameras and mics and we can talk with each other. But if questions occur to you as we go along, just put them in the chat and we'll keep track of them for you. So our agenda for today is basically to give you a little bit of background in the next few minutes on this Arts and Climate California project overall. We're then going to have a presentation of the findings from our Bay Area research that we've been undertaking over the last 9 months. And then Adriana and I are going to talk about resources that relate to the various projects and arts and climate change activities that all of you are undertaking that we've learned about through this project. And we're going to have 2 special guests that we're very excited about to talk about ways to get involved in the movement. Then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. And so let's roll into the next slide, Adriana. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to frame this day for any of you who have not been at our previous webinars or events, and make sure you have the context of what we're up to here at Arts and Climate California. We're a project, not an organization. We're an 18-month project, started back in July, so we're about at the midpoint now. And this is research that we are undertaking across 5 regions in California. The Bay Area pilot, which is wrapping up today, was the first region, and up next we'll be going to Los Angeles, and then 3 other regions of California undertaking an arts and climate change needs assessment, looking at what are the impacts and needs of climate change on frontline cultural organizations and artists in these communities. We also will be undertaking a statewide survey with our friends at our national policy organization, Americans for the Arts. And the California Arts Council is our statewide partner who will help us with that survey and community engagement with the survey, as well as outreach, especially as we get outside of these urban regions where we have more contacts and we need to meet new folks and get other agencies and intermediaries involved in the research with us. The impetus for this work was research that our team, including our partners at Blue Garnet, Wei Ting Chen and Jenny Li Shen, and this group that you're seeing here today undertook over a year ago. And we learned, sort of to our shock and amazement, that there was no aggregate data on the impacts of climate change or the needs of the cultural sector in terms of entering the green economy. We, having worked for multiple decades in this field, felt like it was essential that we as researchers began to get a handle on what was going on in the cultural sector related to climate change. We also, at the same time in that early research, came upon 2 really important studies, one from APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, and one from the Greenlining Institute, back from 2019, so not new research, really centering frontline communities as most impacted by climate change and least climate resilient. And because those were communities that we had done, all of us as a group, a lot of work with over the years in the arts and cultural sector, we felt like it was really important for us to focus on frontline cultural organizations and frontline communities for this research and start there in terms of understanding needs and impacts. The other impetus for this project was we learned that there was both a very large pot of money at the time, over $40 billion identified by the Biden administration in the Infrastructure Reduction Act for green projects, decarbonization, climate change. And we also learned that at the state level, there were several pools of money, including a big $90 million pool at the Office of Emergency Services from the state of California available for resiliency planning. Unfortunately, much of this has shifted now, and I know that's not a surprise to folks who are on this call. But much work goes on in the climate space, and we're very committed to sharing the information we have, which most closely aligns with what we've heard from all of you and our colleagues in the arts and cultural community about what you want to pursue in terms of addressing needs and impacts of climate change. We're delighted that we're having this Pathways conversation today, and we're holding 2 realities at the same time. One, that resources we expected when we came into this project no longer exist, but also the reality that there's tremendous enthusiasm and engagement for this movement and for this work. And we were thrilled to learn that, and we feel like it will multiply as we go across the state. So with that, I want to turn things over to Susan, who's going to talk a little bit about what we've learned in the Bay Area research.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcy. So, the design for this project was really participatory action research. So the idea was that we'd have a series of conversations, and this is kind of the culmination of those conversations. We started with talking with about first we identified over 150 organizations in the most climate vulnerable communities in the Bay Area. And then we talked to 51 individuals one-on-one. Then we had a webinar event which had over 55 people attend. We had a World Cafe with over 90 people who came, and then we had a think tank with about a couple dozen people. So I feel like we've engaged so many of you and really appreciate your participation in identifying your own needs, your own interests, and actually helping us identify resources that are still available today, even under this current climate, to actually meet your needs around climate change. As we were talking to all of you over the last few months, there were three types of organizations that really had prioritized climate change as their core issues. The one were youth-serving organizations, and this was primarily because young people themselves were saying, we want to look at climate change or related topics like urban gardening, recycling, those types of things that address climate change. Another area were looking at organizations with indigenous roots. And as Shreya pointed out in our World Cafe, this includes groups that are specifically indigenous and have ties to indigenous communities, as well as organizations that have communities that have indigenized and that recognize their historical ancestral roots in indigenous communities. And then there's also dual mission arts organizations. These are organizations that they provide a social service in their communities. And so they're really working with the community day after day on things like food, housing, healthcare, etc., and education. Next slide. So we asked folks what were the impacts that people were experiencing. And those impacts were this multiplier effect, the ripple effect, the global community effect, and the universal belief in stewardship. So I'm going to talk through each one of those. The first is the multiplier effect. So what is really clear is that in the most climate vulnerable communities, people are already being impacted by major issues like public health issues, environmental justice issues, economic disparities, systemic racism. And climate impacts actually are multiplying the impact of those already existing injustices and oppressions. The second thing is the ripple effect. So not only is climate change causing a multiplying effect, but there's also a ripple effect on things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with climate. So for instance, there is definitely an increase in cost for insurance and utilities that can be traced back to changes in climate, either the increased natural disaster costs that are raising insurance prices or causing insurance not to be available, or the change in heat that is causing changes in the utility costs. Those types of things are having that ripple effect. We also found other ripple effects. People talked about how the community members were actually moving out of their community because it was too hot. They couldn't find good jobs. And so like if you were a neighborhood-based organization and your community is leaving, it does leave you feeling a little bit, wondering like, where are you anchored? Where are your roots because of that displacement? And some groups that are doing events talked about the lack of predictability, whereas you might always be able to have an event in August and trust that the weather would be a certain way. Now you might have to predict too much heat or rainstorms or things that you wouldn't normally account for. Also unique to the Bay Area, it was really clear that people saw themselves as part of a global community. They have friends and family all over the world that are being affected by climate change, like hurricanes. And these could be within the United States, like people in North Carolina that were affected by the flooding, or they could be in another country, like if they were in the Caribbean or in the Philippines when there are tsunamis or hurricanes. And then lastly, another place that's unique for the Bay Area is this idea of stewardship. And I think this one is really important because one of the things we talked about over the course of these last few months is that a lot of the emissions that are related to climate change, 88% of it comes from capitalist consumerism, right? And those particular emissions, it really makes a difference if people universally believe that the environment is something that we should steward and that we're committed to that and we need to shift our actions, behaviors towards it. So it's a really great thing that many of the cultural groups and individuals that have been participated, they already have this belief in stewardship and are interested in shifting culture and narrative towards that more broadly across the population. Next slide. So not only are there a lot of impacts of climate change, there are also a lot of efforts that people are already involved in terms of climate change. One is actually creating artistic work about climate and our relationship to the earth. The second is participating in active movement building, whether that's organizing people to take action or using arts to make a political statement. People are involved in a whole range of movement building activities. And the last is being involved in decarbonization and adaptation activities. So like upgrading HVAC or shifting public green spaces. And what's important about these current efforts is they often overlap. So like, for instance, we talked to many artists that talked about how, the way that they're actually producing the art, they're being mindful of the climate impact and decarbonization, right? Or we're talking to young people who they name climate as the thing that they want to focus on. And so they're doing a play, they produce a play around climate change in order to activate and be engaged in influencing their communities or moving towards a policy change. So many of these things actually do overlap. And let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about the future. So, of course, the future is going to be exponentially worse. But I will just say that over the last 6 months, as we've been talking with all of you in the various forums, the overriding sense is a sense of hope. And I'd love to check in towards the end of this call when we're asking you about what pathways you see forward to see, where is that hope now? I know life has changed a lot for us since November and especially since January, but I want to remind us where we found hope before. So the first is really that the Bay Area and people who are in the cultural space, both artists and cultural workers, they really could take leadership towards climate justice and have influence over the policies that are governing the Bay Area. The second is just the power of artists and young people. They themselves have already been pushing for change. And it is because of them that many organizations have prioritized climate change as part of the work that they're doing. There's a lot of work around the green built environment in the Bay Area, changing over public spaces and making sure that those are carbon neutral spaces, that they address heat waves and heat bubbles. And then the last actually was people did have hope in the regulatory environment, a strong belief that government can actually support us collectively to move towards climate change. And a great example of that was zero waste. Now, some people, of course, they said it's a lot of pain to actually do all this sorting. It's a lot of work. But at the same time, it's a common thread that everybody is committed to getting to zero waste. So people did wonder, what else can the government do in terms of providing regulations that are a guiding force for all of us? In order to actually take advantage of some of these beautiful potential futures, the Bay Area cultural sector did articulate several needs. On the next slide, you can see those needs are funding, all types of funding, including like general funding, funding for artistic work, funding to rehab facilities, funding for green spaces and the built environment, or just cost subsidies, funding so that insurance and utility costs don't drive us out of business, right? That was the biggest one. People also wanted access, like first they wanted education, which is fourth on the list. Like, let us understand what are the specific climate change impacts in our communities. Hopefully this research has helped with that. And what are some of the solutions? And then once we have those solutions, give us the access to the data, the technology, the experts, the tools to put them into place, right? And then the other two pieces that people wanted was they wanted to have partnerships with other people who have already done this work before, that so that they don't have to recreate the wheel. They can actually kind of like make it a little bit easier to get engaged in climate change, given everything else that's going on. And also advocacy. How can we be involved in like actual policy and budget advocacy at the county level, at the city's levels, et cetera? So overall, when you look at all of these so far, you can really see that there is like a lot of enthusiasm and there's a lot of individual and organizational efforts that are moving towards like addressing climate change in the Bay Area. And we also talked about like what are some of the projects that people are most interested in. So if we can move to the next slide, I want to unveil them. So at the World Cafe, yes, we identified 12 different types of projects that people are interested in. And those 12 projects, I'm going to just name them so that you have a sense of what they are. So one is that people wanted to have community building experiences. Like so many of the cultural organizations that are rooted in the most climate vulnerable communities are actually having like rich conversations with their communities using the arts. And so how do we create these experiences like futuristic film screenings where people can really in the community can really understand how is climate change affecting them, not as a distant thing or not as just a crisis thing, but on a day-to-day basis, right? A second project that came up was around resiliency hubs. I'll talk about that in a moment. Educating professionals on sustainability. I'll also talk about that in a moment. And then doing intergenerational work. There was a lot of interest in arts education, how we can bring younger and older generations together to think about solutions, to get inspiration and hope from each other. There was interest in like actually creating connectivity between the artists and the activists. And we'll actually share a project that's related to that towards the end of this presentation. Another project that was of interest was looking at media. Like, how can we work together to shift narratives and frameworks and integrate into pop culture? I'm not yet at the 5 projects yet. And then the last 3 that I want to name before I want to move to the top 5 are supporting circular economies. So that, you know, how do we create circular economies where we can support each other in trade or in other ways so that we can be self-sustaining? How can we get art into the public spaces, like get them into city meetings and things like that? And how do we create an open source information hub so that there's a place where we can all go to, like an online portal to get information about arts and culture? So I went through a lot of projects, but there are 5 that really rose to the top. So if we move to the next slide, I'm going to slow down and share with you these 5 projects. So again, there were, by the end of our World Cafe, we still had over 50 people in the room. And these are the 5 projects that people spent the afternoon talking about, like what would it actually take to make these things happen? And then after we had that conversation, we went and spent another day with Think Tank talking to 24 people about what are the resources that can make these projects happen. And so after I share these 5 projects, Marcy and Adriana are going to talk about what the resources are that can actually help you to implement these projects or your own projects, whatever those might be, right? So the 5 projects are around creating physical community spaces, resiliency hubs, and social infrastructure, right? This idea is basically, can we create spaces where if there is a disaster, there's a place for people to go, right? If there is a wildfire, there's a place for people to go. If there is flooding, there's a place for people to go. Can those places also be places where people prepare? So ahead of time, they're getting information about what to do for disaster preparedness, right? So that's the first project. The second project is about organizing artists. And when we were together, we talked specifically about how artists themselves can be engaged in eliminating plastics and what they could do around that. But it could be on any specific objective. The most important thing was like really noticing that artists have already been on the forefront of organizing around climate change, and how do we actually support them to do that even more, actually. The third project is really interesting because I think this will make sense to many of you who are on this call, that it's about how do institutions really embody sustainability in everything they do. So what this group was talking about is like, we have like policies that are making people do zero waste, or we have people that are doing HVAC upgrades because they want to lower their utility costs and be able to deal with some of the crises that are coming up around heat or smoke. And that's happening at a very ad hoc level. But it's not that the institution itself has really rethought its way of being and everything it does, events and programming, to be around sustainability and to be thoughtful about sustainability. And so that's what this project was really about. What would it take to really embody sustainability as an institution? And then the fourth project was, what if we took this from a different angle? Instead of working with like specific individuals or with organizations, what if we looked at professions? And what people got really excited about in the meeting was the idea of working with DJs as a first place. Like, they're already working in the cultural sector, they're moving from different places. Like, how do we educate them on sustainability? And then they can educate each other across all DJs on sustainability, and then engage that and support their audiences to understand about sustainability. So that was the fourth project. And then the fifth project, I think, is really exciting. This is like the unlikely allies, and there's a lot of possibility happening right now around this, of like, how do we bring artists and cultural groups into other sectors? Like, for instance, having them connect with scientists so that they can do work together. Those are the 5 projects. And now I'm going to pass it to actually talk about specific resources. So if we could all just take a deep breath together and out. It's been a fire hose of information about what is currently going on in the Bay Area, the amazing efforts that are already underway, the incredible dreams people have for things we could do together. And as we pivot to Marcy and Adriana, just want to name that these resources are available to you to utilize as individuals, as organizations, for these projects, or for whatever you might use. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan. So Marcy and I are going to go over some resources that the team identified through the research phase that Susan gave us such a great overview on. We're not going to go into detail on every resource we found through the research phase, but we did compile a list with ones that we felt would be particularly relevant to the Bay Area arts and culture community, which we can share in the chat and with folks afterwards. And I'm going to provide a general overview of the kinds of resources that we found, and then I'm going to hand it over to Marcy, who's going to dive deeper into some of these. So during the research phase, we identified a bucket of resources that was focused on community gathering and learning. A desire to connect with and know who else in the community is interested in this intersection of arts and climate change is something that we heard through the interviews and at community engagement events. Resources in this bucket range from programs at local arts agencies, which we'll hear more about later on, to organizations working globally to bring practitioners together through a range of programs like fellowships and conferences. One example of that is Julie Spicicle's Creative Climate Leadership Program, which helps empower artists and cultural professionals to take action on climate change in their communities. Another bucket of resources that we found was focused on technical assistance and capacity building. These range from organizations that are helping groups assess things like their carbon footprint to others supporting groups to develop disaster preparedness plans. For example, the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response, or NCAPER, is launching a new program later this year, specifically in the Bay Area, called the Bay Area Arts Readiness Network. And they'll be providing preparedness training, as well as funding for network development and readiness planning for Bay Area artists and artist-run organizations. Um, We also know that having artists engage in policy and advocacy is a really critical part of advancing movement on climate change, and that artists have a really powerful role to play here. Marcy's going to dive into a couple of examples that folks can tap into both at the national and state level. And lastly, we know that another critical part of this is funding. So we've identified resources focused on emergency relief, support for the creation of artistic work, and decarbonization efforts. And with that, we'll hand it over to Marcy to dive into some more specific examples.
Thanks, Adriana. And this list that Adriana and the team has put together of resources is awesome with lots of links, and we'll make sure that you get it if you share your email address with us. And I think we're posting it as well. So I'm going to talk about 4 particular resources that we just thought would be a good idea to highlight today. These are really opportunities that you can jump into now versus things that are necessarily potentials for the future or happening in other communities and we might want to replicate. The first one is Emerald Cities Collaborative, which is our dear partner and fiscal sponsor on this project. We are tremendously indebted to them because they are climate change experts and we are not. And so they have been a great resource to us through this whole project on understanding this world that is new to all of us who come from arts and culture research. Emerald Cities Collaborative is working on a Resilience Hub project. And as Susan mentioned, this is one of the priority projects that folks came up with in the World Cafe as of particular interest. So this slide describes for you what is a culture and climate resilience hub, and what are some of the characteristics of a resilience hub, which I'm going to let you read for yourself. The most important thing is that the concept of resilience hubs, up until relatively recently, when great partnerships like Arts and Climate California and Emerald Cities came together, were not focused on culture and artists and the role of cultural organizations in communities. And we really uncovered a lot of enthusiasm for that in the Bay Area. And we're very excited that Emerald Cities is taking this forward, this integration of community organizing around resilience hubs and cultural organizations and artists through a new program that they announced yesterday, the Community Organizing and Capacity Building for Resilience Hubs program. They've recently had this funded. It's going to start as early as this spring. It's in Alameda and San Joaquin counties. So any of you who are from the East Bay on this call, this is a real opportunity immediately. And it will provide technical assistance, ultimately funding for a clean energy network. And there are going to be listening sessions starting in the spring as they begin to develop this. In the link that Adriana's posted in the chat, you can submit an interest form. And I'm going to let you explore that more online, but suffice to say, we're thrilled that this is a way to pick up on something that was a priority in the World Cafe and is moving forward right away. Okay, the next slide, please, Giancarlo. Philanthropy California is an organization, it's a partnership of Northern California grant makers and Southern California grant makers to increase climate capacity among nonprofits in the state of California. It's been underway for about a year. We were shocked and amazed when we talked to them at the beginning of this project that they never thought about or considered the cultural sector when they developed this project. But we have been hammering at them for 9 months and telling them what an important sector we are. And they're wonderful people and very receptive. So this project is happening for only 30 more days until the end of April. Make note of this link because for the next 30 days, you can contact them, have free technical assistance from great fundraising consultants at Gary Best Associates. We've gotten to know them well, and they will help you identify any resources that are available sort of in the broad funding community, particularly focused on state of California resources. If you have a specific climate resiliency or decarbonization project that you're undertaking now. I don't want to oversell this because we all know that there's a lot shifting at the state of California funding level right now, but it's important to get in touch with these people. Let them know you're out there. Let them know you're thinking about this doing a climate change project. You know, register here. We're people in the cultural community who are interested in this, who are engaged in this, who are looking for resources. They are trying to expand this program and extend it for another year, but no promises yet, but it's definitely worth getting in touch with them. Okay, next slide, please. Bloomberg Philanthropies. So Michael Bloomberg, because of his longtime commitment to climate change and work that he did during the first Trump administration, started a new project in December for this current era that we're in, called America's All In. And at this stage, this project is a process of aggregating institutions, governments, nonprofits around the country who are interested in accelerating the transition to a 100% clean energy economy. So they have on this website that we're giving you a link to, categorized all the members so far. Most interesting to us about this at this stage is that there's 158 cultural institutions in the United States that have committed that they're all in on this goal. And it's a great list. It's apples, oranges, bananas, and pears. You'll see when you look at it, small, large, different parts of the country. You can sort by California. Our friends at the Marine Mammal Center and the Cal Academy are a couple of local groups that are already on this list. The California Association of Museums, which really has an interesting and robust membership focused on climate change, as I met several of them at their conference in San Francisco in the last month. So these are potential friends for you, partners, folks that you should keep track of if you are looking to get involved in the kind of activities that they're involved in. And to be determined what happens next. I see this as a potential advocacy vehicle, but you'll learn on the website what they're doing so far. Okay, quickly moving, Californians for the Arts, and this is our last resource we're going to talk about today. So Californians for the Arts, as many of you know, is our statewide policy organization for the cultural sector. We've had several conversations with them. Ted Russell is working with them now, who many of you may know, and Julie Baker. And these are three resources that they've just suggested right now we should stay on top of. California Jobs First is a priority initiative of theirs, which is around this creative economy working group that they are hosting, hoping to aggregate resources, have them allocated at the state level towards jobs in the cultural sector. And one of the fields within the cultural sector that has been prioritized is the climate workforce. So stay in touch with this initiative through the Californians for the Arts website. Cal Recycle, definitely worth checking out their page. They have grants available. They have advisory roles. It would be great to have more artists and cultural organizations involved in this, and certainly something that was interesting to folks at the World Cafe talking about plastics. And then finally, the California Creative Corps, not a current program, but one that ended a year ago, and there's conversations about it being brought back. The Bay Area partner was the Center for Cultural Power, a partner and advisor on our project. And we're hoping that this will be funded again because it gave individual artists who wanted to do climate change projects really good support, and interesting projects came out of that. Okay, I'm going to move us along because we have two very special guests who are each going to come on and talk to us for about 5 minutes. And they are going to talk about some ways to get involved in the movement. So we have Danielle from San Jose Cultural Affairs, who is going to talk about the Carbon Neutral Resource Network, and Aradhna from the UCLA Center for Diverse Leadership in Science, who is going to give us the climate scientist perspective and movements that she is involved in and you can get involved in. So Danielle, you're up first.
Hi, everyone. It's really just an honor to be part of this group here. I want to thank Susan and Marcy for gathering us all here and all the team and all the partners who've really made this possible. What is really reinforced is that there are a lot of organizations, artists, and cross-sector groups that are working on addressing our climate crisis. And what we've been doing in San Jose, just to give you a little bit of a background, is about a year and a half ago, we started a climate art program, and that was originally funded through the the Creative Core program through the San Francisco Foundation and California Arts Council. So I just want to plug that program because that was really supportive. And the goal of the program is to work with our arts and cultural sector through the city of San Jose through our Climate Smart program to lower the carbon footprint of our sector to meet the city's goal to being carbon neutral by 2030. And in order to do that, we started a couple different projects and programs to make that happen, overarching the climate art program. We brought on a cultural strategist in residence. You will probably see some things in the chat here from Devin Bella, who's also part of Art and Climate Action, who's our cultural strategist and a great thought leader in this project that really helps us center artists in the middle of the conversations between other city departments and policymakers like the Department of Transportation, Environmental Services, Clean Energy, Waste Management. So having a creative, a cultural maker present was really effective. And then the other piece we did was a resilient artist cohort, which we did a summer learning session where we paid 15 artists to spend the summer learning about sustainability, about their own climate goals, about their environment, what actions they can do, and they created their own action plans and implemented some of those. From that program, several of those artists have continued on throughout the year to really apply what they've learned through the program to their everyday practice. And we've seen that leadership from those 15 artists that we work with really expand out to their own individual communities, which was really a testament to the importance of trusting artists and just sharing that knowledge and information with them. And then the third thing is what I want to share with you is about our carbon neutral creative network. So I kind of look at this as like the B2B piece where we're connecting those who work in the sustainability sector. So that could be people from clean tech, from materials, from education, from science, from other sustainability advocacy organizations, those who are able to help with energy reduction or to help look at like food sovereignty or wastewater. And then our cultural sector. So that could be museums, organizations, individual artists. I always emphasize that individual artists are critical to the creative economy. They are both businesses and residents. So they bring with them an important community. And also anyone else in the creative sector who's interested in learning how they can apply and adapt sustainability. And that includes like understanding what sort of incentives, resources, and funding is available locally, countywide, statewide, and beyond that. That helps really fuel an opportunity to really make that transformation. And we started the network as an in-person charrettes around the city of San Jose, really visiting cultural institutions who had implemented or were in the process of implementing sustainability plans. And we were just open the door for people to learn from each other. And that really it gets down to the importance of the network is that there's a lot of information already out there. There are people who have done the research, are already doing the work, that knowledge exists. So a lot of it is about creating those opportunities to just have a knowledge sharing. And I'm a big advocate of really making it available both online and in person. So we started this year to do more online, more social network type of meetups, and then we put that also with in-person visits, and we've expanded that to be Bay Area wide. So this year we've gone up to the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center in Santa Rosa. We've gone to the Palo Alto Arts Center, who has a sustainability plan, and we have other programs really slated throughout the year that you're all of you on this call are welcome to attend. There'll be a link in here. And if you have a workshop that you're interested in providing, if you have a place that you wanted to see, definitely please share that with us, because we do really provide that opportunity to meet up in person. That really helps with that a more ephemeral connection, and allows people to organically exchange information and learn from one another. And people are really happy to share their knowledge out. That consistency and that knowledge sharing is really what's going to help us get through these next few years. We're in an uphill battle with where a lot of the work that we've done over time is being pushed back because of our values, but we need to hold on to those values and continue with that through this network opportunity. And we also have a Discord, so that provides places for you to post opportunities, events, meetups, ask questions. We do check that resource hub, or we use it as our resource hub. We use that Discord channel to help with some of that conversation, and we want to offer that as a space for everyone on this call to continue to connect with us. We are really open to making this as broad in this Northern California piece as we can, as people can actually get to. And this is like just a moment of invitation to continue on this network building and movement building as we move forward into the next few years. So
Thank you
I think that's
so
it.
much, Danielle. I just that the motivational piece was what Danielle said to me on the phone when we talked a week ago. And I was like, you have to come on this webinar and say this. So Danielle, thank you so much. And for this tremendous resources you are providing. Okay, I am going to jump things over to Aradhna, who's joining us from UCLA, our favorite climate scientist friend. And she's going to tell you a little bit about how to get involved with the movement from her perspective and her work.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Marcel. I'm so glad to have this chance to connect. My name is Aradhna Tripathi. You can call me Tree Party. My pronouns are she, they. My family are from the Fiji Islands with ancestry from India, and I'm a climate science professor at UCLA, which is on Tongva land. And as a climate scientist, I wear multiple hats. I also am the founding director of the Center for Diverse Leadership in Science, which supports more than 500 people as fellows. And so we have community fellows that include artists and storytellers, traditional culture bearers, promotoras. We support early career fellows, high school students, undergraduates, graduate students from a range of different disciplines, and then some faculty fellows. And they work together on projects that disrupt the traditional hierarchies of who gets to ask questions, who gets to see their dreams resourced, who gets to kind of shape climate policy. And, this work has really come to the fore as we realizing we're navigating an era that's defined by climate crises. At the beginning of this year, we had a series of fires that surrounded us in Tavanga in the LA basin that were the most costly financially speaking disaster in the history of the US. The estimates are somewhere between 250 and 350 billion dollars. And there's so much that has been lost from, we are seeing that communities that are defined based on historic redlining practices, Black and Brown communities, are the ones where most of the homes were lost. This is also where most of the lives were lost. It's also where people were booted off their insurance last year. And it's also the places where we're still seeing people living in cars. Whereas in other neighborhoods that were impacted by the fires, the impacts were not as as grave. And so we're seeing these very disproportionate impacts. We also see these disproportionate impacts in terms of who's been losing their jobs. Um, be they folks who are caring for homes, caring for young people in homes, who are caring for elders. And so we're seeing their very skewed vulnerabilities. Now, imagine the fact that right now, multi-billion-dollar climate disasters are occurring every 3 weeks on average in the US. They used to occur every 4 or 5 months in the 1980s. And so when these things happen again and again in a state, they can bankrupt a state, they can destabilize families, businesses, and communities, and impact relationships with place and culture and sovereignty. And at the same time, climate change is so much more than just a carbon phenomena. It is about decarbonization, but to get there, and to recover, to be resilient, to center the resilience we all hold, it is about the arts, it's about culture, it's about food and water, it's about economies. And so, I'm here to just really emphasize that all of us have a part to play in this. We have set up a coalition, the Reparative Climate Action Coalition, that has a number of different organizations. We have more than 60 partners. And some of the examples of the wins that have been led by traditional culture bearers include land back, land rematriation to the Gabrielino Shoshone Nation in Northeast LA. It includes things like now in the state of California, there's a medical buffer zone around all of our homes, that we can't have oil and gas drilling in residential areas, which was not the case 3 years ago. And so to get to this place, to get to having these wins, it's taken organizing by traditional culture bearers, it's taken the arts, it's taken a number of different strategists, bringing their passions and their skills and their networks to the work, and really thinking about the issues in the communities that they can connect with. There's a really interesting paper that was just published about how a group of students, community members, faculty, and staff at UC San Diego, they over 5 years led the calls for decarbonization at their campus, which supports several tens of thousands of people. And they recently won. They also got a climate requirement passed. So these things are happening in our lifetimes, right? And actually in the timescale of 5-6 years. There was also a study that was done that looked at more than 300 social movements during times of rising authoritarianism recently, globally. And they showed that when 3.5% of people are activated, that is the tipping point. That's when authoritarians no longer to think about ways we can hold the line, we can engage in the communities that we're part of. And I really want to highlight how excited I was of artists, of diverse artists, because in fact, that's really at the tip of the fear. It's how people take the fear that they're feeling and instead feel like they should be filled with rage, with anger. They should be filled with hope. And that is such a key part of movement building. So I'm just wrapping up now. I just want to say I welcome any of you getting in touch. We support artists as fellows in pursuing their ideas and would be so excited to have the opportunity to learn from you about your work, your vision, and find out ways we can work in solidarity with you.
Radna, we
Thank you.
love your message. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate it. We are now going to just move. We have about 5 minutes left, folks, and we're going to open up all the cameras if everybody would like to turn on their camera or their mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. If you have a question that you feel more comfortable just putting in the chat, We will field those. I'm sorry we don't have a huge amount of time, but this is not the end of the conversation. This is merely the beginning. We are all meeting each other, and we have over the last 9 months, and we're not going to lose touch. So please let us know if you have a question, and Susan and I and the team will try and answer, and we'll wrap in just a few more minutes. Throw your hand up. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear voices. I love seeing so many faces. Thank you for joining us. It was really exciting to be reading the chat as we were going through and just see the range of folks who are here. Every time we do one of these events, we just keep hearing from different people, which means this is this infinitely growing group, which is amazing. Okay. Anyone have a question? No? All right, Susan, you going to pose a question? Or do you want to make a
Sure.
final comment, Susan? I'm going to you, my co-facilitator.
Yeah. So what we want to do is just hear, what is your pathway forward? Like, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about what the needs are. We've talked about what products were of interest. We've talked about the resources that are available. But what we would love is for each person in the chat, as part of our closing, to name one step forward, right? What's your path forward?
Very inspirational. So while people are putting their path forward into the chat, we will let you know that our path forward is we are planning on, in the next couple months, date to be determined, launching a similar needs assessment to the one that was undertaken in the Bay Area, but in Los Angeles County. So instead of thinking about 9 counties and 10 million people, I think we're going to be thinking about 1 county and 20 million people and designing a needs assessment for that work. We have some wonderful partners down in Los Angeles, including Aradna and her folks at the Center for Diverse Leadership in Science. We have La Plaza and LA Commons as partners, including several of the government agencies in the region, and a really comprehensive way of thinking about arts and climate change in Los Angeles County, because it includes relief and recovery right now. So there's, relief, recovery, resilience, needs assessment being rolled together at a very unique moment in Los Angeles.
Great. We're starting to get a few coming in. I'm not going to read all of them, but Alphabet Rockers talked about, gosh, now there's so many went away from me, continuing to partner with stewards of the earth to activate and inspire children in the road ahead, finding a way to talk to local city government officials about the importance of intertwining the arts, culture, and climate sectors, going to a mall nearby to see if they'd be interested in opening up a resilience hub. Our path forward is continuing to work in the community to educate and elevate our youth. So many amazing stories. We're going to keep all of these, take some time to look at them. I also just want to end with a deep gratitude to all of you. This was a dream. Marcy, myself, and Wei Ting, like a year and a half ago, we said, let's do this thing as just 3 individuals. And then we couldn't have done it without you, like, to be in conversation with you. We're so grateful for your time, for your wisdom, and for your community. And we hope that you're able to take these resources and really move them forward, move all these ideas forward in your own communities. So thank you.
With that, we're going to adjourn. Thank you all for taking the time today to be with us, and we look forward to next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is so good. Should we stop the recording?
Yeah.